And when you're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. My name is Natalie, and I want to get right into today's episode. We're going to hear from Janice Callahan. She had an NDE in 2018 following a long on and off again battle with addiction. Her experience was and still is life-changing, and she's here to share with us. Here's Janice.
My name is Janice Callahan. I am a near-death experiencer from the beautiful state of Texas, mother of 3, and just lover of all things spiritual and beautiful. I enjoy nature and books and art. So prior to my experience, I did have some religious views. I grew up in a pretty secular household, though. We didn't really go to church. We didn't really talk about spiritual things. However, I always had that part of me that was searching and seeking for truth. I did look into so many different religions and different denominations prior to this experience. Prior to this experience, I think I was terrified, if I'm being honest, of God and what it might mean for him to see me and know me. As a person who struggled with addiction off and on for years, there was a very present threat of death in my life. And so I lived in a place where I was going from one extreme of the pendulum to the other, carefree, loving life to periods of deep addiction and darkness and fear. In October of 2018 was one of the periods, the darkest periods of my life. I had been struggling at this point for about a year in addiction, but this time the addiction was going deeper than it had ever taken me before. I had graduated, so to speak, from being a weekend warrior to getting completely strung out on a regular basis. Somehow, in the midst of this, I would have like a week or two sabbatical from using, but then it was just like I could never break free. I could never really break free. And when I wasn't currently using, there was still the desire to get high. And so the night of my experience was no different than that. I had a few weeks clean, went to a couple of meetings for like fellowship for people who struggled with addiction. And this night I went over to a good friend's house. In fact, it was my boyfriend at the time. And he and I were going to party. It was just what we were going to do. I couldn't wait. It'd been a few weeks. So as I began the so-called celebration, I realized pretty quickly that there was something wrong. And so I took a couple of hits of my drug of choice. And normally that would be no big deal, something I'd been doing, like I said, off and on for many, many years. And it was a stimulant, and normally it wouldn't cause any problems. But this particular night, he actually approached me and blew marijuana smoke in my face. And I don't know what happened, but some kind of a chemical reaction happened. Whether it was that the first drug was laced with fentanyl, I'll really never know. Or was it because the two in my body like reacted against each other? I honestly don't know, but I immediately began to asphyxiate and not be able to breathe from the moment he blew that in my face. And it was such a rapid succession of my throat feeling like it was closing, me trying to get like a sip of water to clear my airway, which was a huge mistake, ended up making my situation worse. he helped me onto his couch. And I remember panicking. I was so terrified of dying. And yet, what was happening, I was completely out of control. My body was completely out of control at this point. There was a very real reaction happening within my body that I was powerless to fight against. So I'm getting maybe 10% of the air that I need, but also what's happening is it felt like I was just acutely aware of every organ in my body, every cell of my body. And it was like there was a war literally happening in my body. And I was fighting to stay alive, but it was like death was overtaking me. And I remember, crying out and asking him to pray, and I remember praying myself. And um even though I did grow up in a pretty secular home, though, like I said earlier, I had always been searching, and so I did have a faith in Jesus, and I did call out for Jesus to save me. And I was of the awareness that I had went too far, which in addiction, this is something that, like, as a person with addiction issues, like, you just go through. It's part of your everyday life almost. Maintaining, getting on your level and trying not to die in the process of it. And this just was not, I was unsuccessful at it. And I knew I was dying. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I remember feeling this sensation of um, the the functions of my body beginning to slow down, while also it was as though my spirit was separating, or like being loosed, like from my physical body, my shell. And um, my spirit went to the ceiling. And I remember looking back at myself and seeing him, the person that I was with, not overly concerned about my well-being. I remember that very quickly it accelerated from my spirit being outside of my body and me feeling like I was hardly being tethered to this world, in such a way that it's so hard to explain. But I didn't feel any pain at this point, but I still didn't want to die. I did not want to die. And then it was as though I was looking out from my own eyes again, but this time in my body. And I could literally feel like the very energy of my being begin to flow down and out of my feet. So my blood was just flowing downward, the energy flowing down to my feet. I remember looking at my chest and like trying to will my heart to beat again, trying to will my lungs to take in air, but they wouldn't. And so I knew, like I just knew that I had been such a fool. This was it. I'm panicking, I'm terrified. Somewhere in me, there was also this thought that I didn't have to die. And I was going to cling to that thought, that it was an option. And so I'm laying there. My body is lifeless. It was as though my body had died, but my brain was still active. So I'm guessing, just from what I've read, sometimes our brain actually stays alive for a few minutes. And I believe that that's what I was experiencing and seeing. And I remember there was a clock with red digital letters. And I remember looking at the clock, and I know that it was around 9:30 p.m., 9:31. And, just knowing that once my eyes closed, that was it, lights out, literally. And so my eyes closed. And then when I opened my eyes, I was in the most beautiful place. And it was so amazing. The environment that I went to, it was like an opal, like a living color, but it had like lavender and gray and a rainbow effect to it where it would move and it was just alive. The color was alive and it was just so heavenly. And I'm standing there, and to my left, there's three very tall ethereal beings. And like, I'm talking 7, 8, or 9 feet tall. I'm only 5'2". So, they were very tall to me. And I remember there were three, and they're looking at me, and it's as though they know who I am, but I seem to know them too, on some level. And I did not want to go with them. I knew that the one was extending his hand, or what seemed to be a he. I don't know. They didn't seem like they had any kind of maleness or female to them that I could see, but it was just the way it felt. And so, just to kind of describe them a little bit more, head like us, a torso like us, arms and legs, so human-like in their shape, but without the features. And so they were actually like an energy that I could just see through. And I could see right through them. But man, I knew these were powerful creatures, nothing to mess with. I absolutely knew that. But when he extended his hand for me to go with him, I just kind of slapped it away. I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not dying. I'm not dying. I'm not staying here. I'm not staying. And then in front of me was a presence that I couldn't see, but I could feel, and it was radiating power, a love into me and at me. And the presence was huge, almost like I was standing in front of a cloud. And I felt so small, so tiny, and so powerless, against this energy, this being, this spirit in front of me. And the first thing that came to my mind, and that the first thought that formed at that point was, oh my God, thank you, Jesus, for your sacrifice on the cross. Because I knew that this kind of power should have completely obliterated me. It was so strong. This is like if you're touching a live electrical current and it is going through your entire body. This is beyond anything that you could feel on earth and survive. And it is love. That's the only way to describe it. And it's beaming at me. And I'm feeling like, wow, wow, I am known, like I'm found out what I was just doing. It's not a secret. And yet I'm loved. And yet I'm known and loved. And so I began what I would call the negotiation, or the pleading for my life. Please, 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 please let me go back. And what I'm saying is, let me go back and take care of my daughter, Kate. At the time, I had 3 children, 2 of them much older, and 19, 16, and then 4. And so in my mind, I'm actually completely aware of who I am in my whole life. I have my bank of memories. And I'm thinking that my older child, she's engaged to be married at this time. And I know that she's going to be okay, and that she knows that I love her. My little boy, he's precious. At the time, he was 16, and he was with his dad. I knew that he knows me, and he knows how important and how special he is to me. But my little girl, who's 4, I was really so remorseful, because she didn't know me like these 2 did. And I remember thinking that she would never even remember me, that if I didn't go back and finish raising her and taking care of her, that I would just be like a whisper of a memory in her mind. And she had never experienced much of her life. She was just so tiny, and how could I be so unwise and so selfish? And I'm just having these thoughts in my mind, like, of how ignorant I was to be doing this and playing this Russian roulette with these substances, and how for this little period of pleasure I was risking it all. And it was just so, but his presence wasn't telling me these things. This is what my own mind. So there wasn't any condemnation. I was just simply experiencing this level of wisdom that I had never ever experienced. It was like my mind had been opened to a level of super consciousness to understand the greater purpose, to understand the greater meaning of things. And it was as though he was allowing me to remember different points of my life where I saw things that had happened where I felt horrible and victimized, and but I was now feeling completely different about them and viewing them so differently. And so at this point, um, his presence is very calm, and I'm saying, okay, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I want to go back, I want to go back. And then it's as quickly as you can, even like less than a second, we're in a second location, but we never walked there, we just were there. It was like uh immediate teleportation or transmutation. I don't know the right word, but we were in another environment. And this environment was beautiful. There were millions of people just standing there waiting as we were on a platform, and I was looking out at them. And they were expressionless. There was a sense of that they were waiting for something. And I was just looking at them and knowing that they were expecting something. And I lean into the Father at this point, because now I've realized this is the Father. This is the Father, God himself. And so I'm asking him, what do I do? And he said, love them. And I'm looking at this sea of faces, and there's so many people there, and they're all dressed alike. Nobody looked differently. Nobody dressed differently. They were all wearing the same, like, garment, almost like scrubs, like a doctor would wear. Um, and they're just looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and I'm weighing the cost of loving them. And I feel like it sounds fair enough. And so I said, okay, but what do I change? And I'm referring to the story. How did I end up with you? How did I do I tell them how I got here? Do I tell them what horrible things I was doing? Do I tell them how sick I was? Do I tell them the truth? And he says, nothing, as if to say that I couldn't have changed myself, that he was taking on him. He was going to change me. He was going to do that work. And so I said, okay, well, what do I say? And he said the truth. And then I said, okay, but where am I going to learn everything? And I'm still looking at the sea of faces. And he says, it's within you. It's already inside of you. Well, that really was novel, because that was a surprise to me that there would be something inside of me that these people would want or need. And then as quickly as I came into agreement, and I was getting excited because I was feeling like I was going to get to come back at this point. We're in the first environment again. And this environment, again, it's just like it's moving in synchronicity to his presence. And then it's quickly like I'm whisked into him. I'm literally inside of his spirit, inside of his presence. And I'm seeing he is showing me how he is holding me together, my very being. I'm seeing from a very atomic or cellular level that he is what holds my being together. And that I am a spirit, a soul, and a body. Before this time, I tended to think of myself as a body, and I didn't really give a deeper level of thought to being a spirit, because I was always looking for spiritual things outside of myself, not understanding that I am the spiritual thing. And I'm also seeing that there's other people in him, and they're like living their lives as though they're not even aware of the fact that they are inside this great presence. And so I don't know how long I'm in this, but I know that while I'm there, I'm just being transformed somehow, some way, in a supernatural way. And so after a period of time, who knows how long, I am aware that I'm coming back to my body. I'm aware that I'm going to get to live. I am so grateful and so humbled. And then I'm in my body, and I remember very quickly taking this deep, deep breath that this, like if you'd come up from out of the water and you just, and it was so deep. It was the deepest breath I've ever taken. And the person who was with me, I remember his expression as he turned to look at me, and he was just shocked, and his face was so white. It was like he had seen a ghost. And at that point, I began to feel this sensation of intensity, of intense heat, like go through my body just as quickly as you could imagine, just within the full whole body. And it was like I was burning alive from the inside out. And it was scary, but it wasn't harming my physical being, but it was very scary. So I am panicking again, like, oh no, what have I done to myself? Oh my gosh, and then it was as though I began to speak out. And so what I thought I was saying was, love is the answer, love is the answer, love is the answer. But the person that was with me, he said that I wasn't even speaking English, that it was a completely different language, but I thought it was English. So from and then I remember that he joked around briefly that he was trying to decide where to put my body. And at that point I knew, you know, I can't explain to you how different I felt at this point. It was as though the love that I felt in that other location in heaven was now floating around inside of me. And it was just like coursing through my veins, just love, 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 love. And I was like, I had this realization that what I had been doing, the narcotics, was actually like a fake version of what I was now feeling. And it was as though my mind had been open to the realm of possibilities in such a undescribable way. I began to understand, because of what I had seen, that we're all truly connected. And I stayed at the same apartment that night, and there was this sensation of relief and freedom within me, that and peace, that I had just never ever been able to find. And so the next day, when I left the apartment, I'm driving, and I remember how beautiful everything looked. It was as though I was seeing with fresh vision, clear vision, everything around me. The sky had never been more blue. The clouds had never been more puffy and white and perfect. And there was, I remember driving over a bridge, and I passed a park, and there was a wedding taking place in the park. And I pulled into a parking spot, and I just sat there and watched them just be joined together in love. And it was as though a switch had been flipped within me. Okay. I'm talking total freedom from addiction, total freedom from, like, I had post-traumatic stress disorder. I had extreme anxiety and depression. Um, so it was like all of that had been washed away, erased completely. And so as I go about my day, and I'm almost feeling like I'm in a fantasy land, a fairy tale. And what struck me the most was how other people didn't seem to be feeling the same way. I met up with my twin sister, and the first thing I did was, I gotta tell you what happened last night. Oh my gosh, I gotta tell you. And at this point, I'm functioning what I would call normally. So I was driving, speaking, like there was no physical ramifications of what had happened the night before. So I tell her, and she's like, let's talk later, because we were going to go have a meeting with someone. And so um, she was very surprised at what I was saying, to be honest with you. And then I went to a girlfriend of mine who was active in her local church, and I thought she would be ecstatic to hear the experience. And she's like, do not share this story with anybody. This is total heresy. And a lot of what she said, I think she was well meaning, but it was very hurtful to me. And so that relationship just fell apart because this was now part of me. This experience had changed who my identity. It had literally changed my identity. Um, at the time of this experience, I actually was in multiple relationships. I was very polyamorous. And after this experience, I desired none of that. I was so fulfilled. It was like reaching the mountaintop, and where sex had been that mountaintop for me for most of my life. Now that seemed like a little hill. Okay. And so what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, it far exceeded any pleasure that I had ever experienced on earth. Um, People became so much more precious to me, so much more beautiful. Um, People became almost like there was a holy awe because I believe what what had happened to me was also somewhere within them. Because when I had the experience and I was shown that we were all within like his spirit, we were actually all connected as well. And so it it took me out of that separation mindset. It took me out of that vengeance and bitterness, and instead I just wanted peace and harmony on such a deep level. It actually changed everything about what I do every day. So I mean, every little detail. So one little detail was, at the time of my experience, I was very anemic, so I chewed ice. And I don't know if you've ever known anyone who chews ice, but I would chew about 10 pounds of ice a day and clean out like the refrigerator, like the ice machine. And everyone would get so annoyed with me because I was constantly chomping ice. I had teeth pain. Oh my gosh. Every tooth in my mouth hurt. And after this experience, I couldn't even stand the idea of chewing ice. It was like that issue with my blood had been healed. Um, as far as parenting, I saw that I was actually here to guide my children and not control them, to show them a higher way of living than what I knew before, and teach them something that was true and real and would stay with them. Sorry, that always chokes me up to even think about that because that is the reason I came back. If I didn't have a little one, I wouldn't be here. Um, Interestingly enough, for a season, it actually, my older children, it pushed them away because I was so drastically different. But my little one, it was like we were children in the kingdom of God, and we were having fun and painting and coloring and baking and climbing trees and going on nature walks and doing the things that really matter. Work meant nothing to me. After this experience, I had always taken a lot of pride in my title and my salary and my commissions and my things, my material things. And after this experience happened, I knew that none of that was real. None of it actually mattered. And I actually made a post about this. I was meditating on it the other day, that it was like I was a child whose father was taking care of her again. So just going from that self-sufficiency to absolute trust and dependence, that Abba Father was going to take care of me. And it didn't always look like I in my mind envisioned, um, but it was always what I needed. But since this experience, I have no fear of death, but I also live life to the fullest. So I'm not living dangerous and recklessly because now I know my life is precious, and every moment of every day I want to be intentional about what I'm doing. I've had a couple of close calls since this experience. I had what they call a mini stroke or a transient ischemic attack, where um, they parts of my brain that affected vision and thinking were impaired because a blood clot had gotten into that area. And here's the thing, when those experiences occurred, there wasn't a fear. It was more like a sense of wonder. What's going to happen? This is amazing. I'm going to enjoy this. And so it's kind of funny because I can still get caught up on those little details of like, he said, she said, and still struggle in an area like gossip. But when it comes to these big things, I'm like, nope, I can do this. It's nothing can hurt me, right? Because I'm walking in the light now. So I have recently transitioned back into real estate, and am enjoying that experience. But and my passion is I love putting and fitting people with the right home for their family, and housing is so important. I had the opportunity to be what I would call home insecure several times since this experience. Never thought it would happen to me, but it did. And so I love that is a ministry of mine, but putting people with the right home and helping them pick out the right dirt for their family's home to be built on. And it's a beautiful experience. But also in the world of using drugs, sexual exploitation happens every single minute of every single day. And those transactions are spiritual in nature. And I know every time those transactions happened in my life, it left me with a void. And so that exploitation can be very hard to get away from. And sometimes the exploitation will actually go a step further into trafficking. So I began working with a ministry that brings women out of exploitation and trafficking. They give these women an opportunity to live in a beautiful home for a couple of years and get healing and have the opportunity to just rest their body and their mind and hear the love of God as is true for them. And so that's a passion of mine, is to help in that area. So if that's something that your listeners are passionate about or feel just know in their knower that that's something that they're interested in helping with, they can actually go to that website. It is restoredhopeministries.org. They always need volunteers and toiletry items and just things women like, and there's all different types of women. The women come from all different walks of life, all different cultures. There is no boundary line for this issue. It's rampant in our country, and it happens right underneath our noses. When I talk about this topic, one of the things that I often say is if you have been to a gentleman's club, chances are you saw a woman being trafficked. There's going to be women there that are doing that of their own volition. And there's also going to be women there that are being forced to do that. At the very least, the women that are there of their own volition are still being treated as an object and completely exploited because they cannot support themselves without doing that work. And so if that's something, that you're interested in helping with, again, that website is restoredhopeministries.org. Yeah, ways that people can connect with me would be Facebook. Giving away my age there, but I'm still a big Facebook fan. And, that is the best way. I'm on Instagram too, but either one is Janice Callahan. I like social media quite a bit, and I love the connections that it's brought into my life. And just like this podcast and meeting you, Natalie, has been such a blessing. I have a book that I'm looking to release at the end of March, beginning of April, and that will be an autobiography as led by the Spirit. And I also contributed to a book which is due for release any day now. I contributed a chapter, but it's actually a compilation project by multiple women who have overcome great adversity and trauma. And so that should be available within the next few days on Amazon.
Thank you so much to Janice for being today's guest. And if you're interested in contacting her, you can find links in the description to do that. Also, there's links there to reach out to me if you're interested in sharing your experience with me. I would love to hear from you. New episodes are released every Wednesday, so look forward to that. And if you want to support the show, there's ways you can do that for free by subscribing and liking and sharing and all the stuff that I know you know already. All right, thank you so much for listening, and see you next week.